What's up guys? Today we're going to check out a brand new home theater setup from MartinLogan. So there's a few changes for this year, which we're going to start off with the MP10. This is the surround speaker which you can use to angle either on your wall, because it does have this wedge mount. So you can kind of like, if you can imagine if this were your wall, you can kind of mount it upside down so it would lean downwards. Or if you wanted to like mount it up on your ceiling, it would kind of angle it downwards as well. Or if you just wanted to use this as kind of like a small bookshelf speaker, you can also use it as a bookshelf speaker. As you can see, this does come with a matte black front fascia, and around the tops and the side, it does have that glossy MartinLogan black finish that can be a fingerprint magnet, hence the black gloves. But something that's really new for this new generation of the Motion Series speakers is that they've got a brand new tweeter within a waveguide. If you remember the older versions, it was just like a flat front, and then the AMT tweeter was, the folded motion tweeter was actually just mounted on the front fascia, so no waveguide. This one does have a 90 by 90 dispersion pattern, so you do get a nice wide dispersion, not only horizontally but vertically as well. So that's new for this year. And then we have some brand new grills which just pop on with these little pressure clips, which you will find a 5.5-inch mid-bass driver. This is comprised of a woven fiber cone, so it is pretty stiff. And this thing has a frequency response of 81 Hertz up to 25K. Now this is a ported speaker. As I said earlier, you can mount this in a bunch of different ways. These are the mounting brackets right here. And you can see this little design here. This is actually a very, very inconspicuous port. So it's a very slim port. I'll show the diagram on screen, but the port fires downwards. So that way you can lay this really flush against your wall without having a port get in the way. This does have some nice binding posts, and included inside the packaging, we have the mounting bracket itself. So that's that guy there. And then you get the mounting hardware, the screws, Allen wrench. There's a couple of rubber bumpers here as well, so it doesn't scratch up your walls. So that's included. And there is a MartinLogan metallic logo. Like I said, this is a fairly compact surround speaker. We are looking at roughly 14 inches in height, and we are around 8 inches wide. We are looking at about 5.25 inches deep. So that can be used as a surround speaker, or if you want a really small kind of bookshelf setup, you can do that as well with those guys. So it's a universal type of speaker. Next up, we have the brand new C10 center channel. We get the same configuration of drivers here. We get the same 1-inch folded motion tweeter inside this waveguide. So you should get a nice wide dispersion at your main listening seat. Behind the grills, you get the same woven fiber cone with a frequency response down to 63 Hertz up to 25K. So it does go a little bit deeper than the surround speakers. Now size-wise, this is again a fairly compact-esque speaker. We are looking at approximately 19 inches wide, about 7.25 inches high, by approximately 11.25 inches in depth. You get the same matte black finish on the front, and then the enclosure itself is going to be that nice shiny glossy black finish. Now if we spin this around, let's take a look at the connections. You can see that we have the same binding posts located in the back, and then this is the ported speaker as well. And then last but not least, we have the brand new F20 tower speaker. Before we actually take a look at the speaker, let's take a look at the accessories box. So in the accessories box, you get some more stickers, and then you have the quick setup guide, which is for this here. These are the outriggers, or if you want to call them the feet, these are the feet which we will install. This comes with this adjustable little dial here, which you can see by turning it. You can either raise the speaker itself opposite direction, you can lower it so you can actually angle a speaker. And this is actually really high quality. It might be the nicest feet that I think I've actually tried out so far. Like, that's a nice high quality spin. So let's go ahead and get this thing installed. We're gonna have to flip this upside down so we can see that this is a ported speaker as well. The port is located on the bottom. Then we'll take the included screw. We'll get that started. And then you do get an Allen wrench inside the package as well. And then that's it. Just do that for all 4 sides and then you are good to go. So it's a pretty simple setup. If you didn't want to use the little rubber tips here, you can unscrew this and then include it in the box. We get some spikes. So if you wanted to go this route, you can go spikes or rubber feet. You can see this speaker is not terribly heavy. It does weigh 60 pounds, although it is fairly tall. So we're gonna come in at about 44 inches in height and roughly 8¼ inches wide. And depth-wise, it is approximately 13 inches deep. We get the same 1-inch folded motion tweeter inside the 90x90 waveguide. And then we have a 5.5-inch mid-range driver. And then on the bottom, this is where it's a little bit different than the other speakers. We get an aluminum bass driver on the bottom, which we get 2 of. So we get 2 of these guys here, 2 6.5s, and this will give you a frequency response down to 35 Hertz, up to 25K. So the high-end detail response of all 3 speakers should be exactly the same, with this one going down to 81 Hertz, this one 63 Hertz, and then this one, of course, being bigger, it'll go down to 35 Hertz, which will probably go a little bit deeper with your in-room response. So let's go ahead and get this thing set up in the home theater. I've got the speakers placed in my theater, and I put the surrounds to the sides and slightly behind my seats for a 5-channel setup. I've got them hooked up to a Trinov Altitude processor and powered by Trinov 8M amplifiers. I also used a Kaleidoscape for demo material. Now, since I'm only testing out the speakers, I ran the speakers full range since I'm not testing on a 5.1 setup. I could send the bass from the surrounds and the center over to the towers, but I want to see how dynamic they truly are on their own. These are very detailed speakers. That is the first thing that comes to my mind. I didn't find them to be as pinpoint accurate as my main Ascendo speakers, but they do have a very crisp, clean quality to the top end. And they also sound bigger than my personal speakers, meaning the soundstage came across wider horizontally throughout my entire room. And like I said, they've got a crisp, sharp quality which really helps to make following the effects around the room very discernible and very discreet. So following the cars around the street or when that wrecking ball comes across the screen, you don't get a smearing of sound like you could if you had warmer sounding speakers. Obviously, having the same exact high quality tweeters in every speaker makes a huge difference here. Now, seeing as I've got all the speakers full range, when the wrecking ball swings across the room, they of course sound heavier in the front speakers than they do in the surrounds. It's clear the MP10s have a pretty hard cutoff, so they aren't producing much bass at all. In a normal setup, you likely wouldn't be running these full range. Instead, having the bass go to the subwoofers, which could help blend everything together a lot better. So if you were going to run an entire system with MP10s, which wouldn't be a bad idea because of the form factor, they'd be really easy to place around the room. But you would 100% need to pair them up with a subwoofer. MP10s with a subwoofer or maybe 2 would be a killer small, inconspicuous home theater setup. It's definitely something to consider if you don't have a lot of space. On the flip side, if you did have the space, F20s for front and surround channels would be sick because they've got the extended top end that's very detailed, and the bass response, depending on your room, digs impressively low, and the attack has a clean, punchy tactile heft to them. This entire movie is pretty thick with bass, and even without a sub, they didn't leave me disappointed. They don't seem to dig low enough to shake your floors, but if you're tight for space or just don't want to have a subwoofer, I think you'd be pretty satisfied with what the F20s can belt out. You know, I've always got to throw in this Quiet Place 2 demo. I feel that these fold-in motion tweeters are so good at high-end detail that they would just open up the walls in my theater, and they did exactly just that. It's all subtle nuance that they've mixed together in the background that, with lesser quality tweeters, would leave this movie flat sounding and lifeless sounding. But every one of these speakers did a wonderful job of opening up the space and creating this virtual air in my room.
I will give you so much more.
You'll die first.
I have died before. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
For such a small center channel, this thing has got some growl to it. I could feel Palpatine's chesty voice coming directly at me. It's heavy and thick and has a real gravitas to its presentation. Even if I had a subwoofer active, I'd still want to feel the bass coming from his face on screen and not just treble. If you have a really big space, then you may need a bigger center for the same effect, so maybe the C100 for a bigger space would be better, but I think for small to mid-sized rooms, the C10 is gonna sound pretty darn impressive. As you might know, it's a little bit hard to tell what the sound signature is of a speaker when you've got a 7-channel setup, 11 channels, 16 channels, sometimes 20 channels or more going all at the same time. So what I did was I took the towers and I hooked them up to my 2-channel setup, which consists of a Michi preamp, an NAD M23 amplifier, a Hi-Fi Rose R520 streamer. I've got everything hooked up with AudioQuest cables, and as comparison, I'm using my personal pair of Perlisten R5T towers. Yes, I know those speakers cost a bit more than the F20 towers, but those are my baseline speakers, so they're kind of my reference point for other speakers that cost less or cost more. With that being said, the main takeaway between these two speakers was that I thought the F20s did sound brighter than the Perlisten speakers. Hotel California by Clara, I found her voice, because she does have a high-pitched voice, and with these particular speakers, the louder that I turned up the volume, the harder it got on my ears. Whereas the Perlisten speakers, the louder that I kept it, or the louder that I turned it up, it remained pretty much smooth all the way across the entire high-end spectrum. Now that's not like a detriment to the speaker, because if you have it in your home theater setup, obviously you can tune that down, you can use your EQ, kind of DSP it down, EQ it down. Now another comparison that I made was with the Dominique Fils-Aimé song, Home. This is actually a great sounding song on these speakers because I did kind of like the brighter sound signature. So it was easier for me to pick out the spatial cues between the instruments, the main singer, and everything else going on in the background. Not that it was hard to hear on the Perlisten speakers, but certain things like the breathiness of her voice, some of the hi-hats that I could hear in the background, or I don't know what all the instruments that are on the song, but there's a little sizzle that goes on in the end. It might be a cymbal or something else, I don't know, but there's a little sizzle that happens at the end. It's easier to pinpoint that on the MartinLogans, whereas it's a bit more reserved on the Perlistens. I also found Soundstage was a little more forward, since it is a brighter speaker. It was a little bit more forward, whereas on the Perlisten, it was definitely slightly further back from where the actual position of the speakers were. So I got a deeper soundstage with the Perlistens, whereas on the MartinLogans, it did feel a little bit more intimate. Now, as far as bass is concerned, I did find them to be very similar to each other on specific songs, but on songs with a lot of deep bass on it, particularly Kanye West's Love Lockdown. If you guys have never heard that song, that's a great song to test out bass on your speakers. It's got just this really big thumping bass note, and it also kind of just reverberates really down low. On the Perlistens, I got some really good extension. I'm going to say probably to about 20 hertz, so I could really feel the room resonate. Whereas on the MartinLogans, I got some taste of some down low extension, but I'm going to say it cuts off probably around 30 hertz or so. So the extension is deeper on the Perlisten speakers, but both speakers still have plenty of punch, plenty of that punch and kick, especially with this song, and especially in other rock songs, like stuff from like Lenny Kravitz or the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So drum beats and all that sound very similar to each other. It's just the extension on the per-listens definitely dig lower. At the time of this video, the F20 tower is selling for $1,750 each. The C10 is $1,000 each, and the MP10 is $500 each. Comparing the F20s against my per-listens, which are twice the price, left me thinking, are they twice the performance? I mean, they're fantastic sounding speakers, that's why I own them, but the F20s are pretty darn close. I could definitely see why some folks might even prefer the F20s over the per-listens. They've got that super detailed top end, the mid-range is just as smooth, and the bass, while it doesn't dig as deep, isn't that far off. There were even times I thought to myself, am I actually hearing a difference here? These new Motions are right there with speakers costing twice as much and maybe even 3 times as much. They definitely have their own distinct flavor, and I gotta say, it's a pretty tasty one. Well, thanks for watching. You can find links down below in this video's description if you want to pick something up, and I'll see you in the next video.